So thank you all for being here with us today, this morning, tonight. Considering we have folks from all over the world joining, it is such a joy and an honor to be here with you as we explore this topic around happiness and really looking at what does it mean to hardwire the brain for happiness. And so I think if at least the way that I think about happiness, I think it's one of the basic human goals. Like at the end of the day, most of us just want to feel happy. And as you might have heard, happiness is the #1 class at Yale University. In 2021 alone, 3.3 million students 3.3 million students registered to take that class. And so it begs the question, what's the hype with happiness? And since so many of us just want to be happy, why aren't we? What gets in the way? And so these are some of the questions that I'm hoping we can wrestle with together. And in terms of the agenda, what I have in mind is really to explore suffering and this concept as a formula to understand what gets in the way of our happiness. Oftentimes, hello, Rose, nice to see you. Such a beautiful smile you're coming in with. Second is to understand how we can rewire the brain to be hardwired for happiness. And then number 3, would love for us to play around and do a bit of a practice and leave with what are some of the specific techniques that we can start to integrate or continue to integrate into our lives. Many of these are not anything that I think will be new for you, but the key is to remember to practice them. And so as we dive into this question, really asking yourself, what gets in the way of my happiness? And we'll start with this exploration of suffering. So what is suffering and why do we suffer? And I think you would agree that, suffering can range from anything like the subtle feelings of loneliness to maybe moderate stress, maybe a way that you feel hurt or angry. Could be grief that you're holding. And then all the way to the intensity of trauma and pain and anguish. But it's oftentimes just this mild and chronic sensation or experience that we have. And especially what we're noticing in this post-pandemic era is that as a human civilization, David Rock from the Neuro Leadership Institute talks about the fact that as humans, we're being forced to endure a chronic state of stress that is frankly unnatural for us as humans to have to deal with. And the problem is that many of us just we haven't armed ourselves with the practices to diffuse and to manage this ongoing stress and crisis and suffering that we're encountering. And so really, the more life sucks, the more we have to be intentional about arming ourselves and resourcing ourselves with these types of practices. So when we can start to really appreciate the full range of emotions as simply being part of the human experience, not good, not bad, but just that it is, then we can really arm ourselves with the tools to navigate the emotions, right? Reminding ourselves that my emotions are mine, but they are not me. I am not the totality of this emotion that I'm feeling in this moment, because this moment and this emotion will also pass. So I'm going to bring some brain science into this. 3 things I want to share with you about the brain. Number 1 is that we're wired for survival, which means that whether we are conscious of this or not, every 7 seconds, we are scanning our environment for threat. Social threat, physical threat. Is there something dangerous in my environment that's coming to harm me? But it could also be that moment when I walked into a friend's wedding and realized that I was the only person in a short dress. It came right below the knee, but everyone was wearing a long gown. And I thought, oh, I'm out of place. That's a social threat. I felt left out. And so we're constantly scanning the environment for threat. The second thing to keep in mind is that we have a negativity bias, and we tend to focus on what's wrong. And even when we are, I think there's a way that we tell ourselves that if I can identify what's wrong, if I can identify the threat or identify the potential harm, then I'm better positioned to mitigate the threat, right? And so third is this pleasure and pain phenomenon. And I'm curious if anyone relates to this, would love to see your comments in the chat. We have this tendency to move towards and desire more of the things that we like and enjoy. So moving towards pleasure and then avoiding pain. It's one of the organizing principles of our brains. I'll keep checking in the chat as we go also to see if any questions or if you have thoughts that are coming up, please feel free to share. So let's dive into these 3 principles of the brain. Always scanning the environment. And Rick Hansen, by the way, who is to me one of the greatest neuropsychologists who studies happiness, he talks about the fact that our brains are like Velcro for bad and like Teflon for good. So the bad stuff tends to stick and the good stuff tends to just slide off, right? And that we're constantly vigilant. This constant vigilance creates this backdrop. And I think, living in a world where it feels like the intensity of suffering is really just strengthening and amplifying, we can always in some way anticipate that bad will come. And so we're anticipating this experience of anxiety. I mean, if you think about, simple things like a performance conversation, someone says, you've been doing great. And there's a couple of things I think you should keep in mind that we should be focusing on improving. And that person goes home and they're laying in bed that night. And what do you think they're going to be thinking about? Not the few things that they're doing well, but the one thing that the person said they need to be focused on. And so we can see this phenomenon in our minds constantly. So anyone ever heard the term once bitten, twice shy? Yep. So really does a nice job of explaining exactly how the brain works, because here's the thing, right? Even though majority of our daily experiences are either neutral and in many cases even positive, north of neutral, because the brain flags experiences as negative, the hippocampus of the brain says, oh my, I didn't like this negative experience. So I got to make sure I keep this one in the filing cabinet so that for future reference, I'll know that when this happens, it's going to be a bad experience. And so even though in the grand scheme of things, our day in the totality of life, and if we count every micro moment of our day, quantitatively, we have more positive or neutral experiences. And yet we lay in bed at night and we don't tend to think about the things that we're grateful for or that we've accomplished. If you're anything like me, the overachieving perfectionist, I'm laying in bed thinking about all the things I did not get done because I'm carrying those things into my day the next day, right? That's what my brain is choosing to focus on. And so in these final moments of our day, we have an opportunity to be at choice. Do I focus on the things that went really well, that I'm grateful for, and the ways that life surprised me today? And oh my gosh, the wonder. Or am I going to focus on the ways that I fell short? It's those micro moments that have this cumulative power that, create our experience. So number 3, this is one that I'm hoping you will take with you from our time together today, which is this innate desire that we have to resist what is, wanting things, wanting life, wanting people to be the way we want them to be, right? Why can't you just put the toilet seat down? And so we think about this suffering formula, which is that suffering equals pain times resistance. And resistance shows up in any way that we are wishing that things are different. than how they actually are. Resistance to whatever is changing in our life circumstances, we tend to have a tendency to grasp to the way we want things to be. I spent the week on retreat last week, and I had a friend reach out to me and say, man, this is really weird. I had such a wonderful time on retreat. Why am I feeling so sad? And I said, are you wishing that you are having a retreat experience right now? Yeah, being back to reality isn't as fun for me. Ah, so you're wishing that things were different than how they actually are. Yes. Okay. So you're amplifying your suffering. It's just in these really simple ways that we're not even realizing that we create this experience of suffering. And as Rose says, the more we resist, the more that it persists. Absolutely. And so it really helps to appreciate this element of impermanence, which is that bringing a sense of acceptance, a sense of allowing, and not just letting go, but also learning to let be. Really such powerful practices. And because resistance is this multiplier effect of suffering, you can think of it as like, pain times resistance. What I feel is really empowering about this is that our ability to meet life's challenges with an attitude of kindness, an attitude of gratitude, can create an openness that loosens and the tightness, right? It's like fabric softener for life's hardship. It really just softens the blow. I woke up this morning with this thought that happiness is not the absence of anything that we might deem to be bad, but it's choosing to experience that experience with a different quality of happiness, a different quality of presence. So we've been talking about suffering for a while. I just want to call your attention to how your mood might be. Not seeing too many smiles, which is not surprising given the topic of our discussion. But pay attention to the fact that our focus on this topic of suffering might have actually created an internal experience for you. And so I just want to see if it's possible for you to tune into the subtlety of that for a moment. And let me know in the chat if you're noticing any mood that might be related to the experience of suffering or this topic of suffering. And then I'd love for us to do a bit of an experiment. And so close your eyes if that's comfortable for you, or holding a soft gaze downward, maybe finding an object on the floor or on the wall. And I'd love for you to just think of the word joy. Just repeating, just a very soft whisper. Think of the word joy. Maybe even bringing a slight smile to the mouth. And just continuing to repeat joy. Maybe even thinking of a place, maybe your couch or your bed, or a place that you enjoy going for a hike or a run, or the beach, a place that for you represents joy. Maybe your favorite meal. What if I could bring you a plate of your favorite food? What if you could take a bite of that food right now? Just inviting this experience of absolute joy. You might even notice your taste buds having a party in your mouth. Maybe your saliva glands are activated. So this is joy. An experience that you're calling in just a few seconds with deliberate attention, deliberate focus. We can experience joy. The power of our own imagination. You can open your eyes whenever you're ready. So in 1 minute, We get to play around with and experience the nature of our minds, realizing that what we focus on gets stronger. And so while we do have this survival mechanism at play, and as my niece likes to say, the good thing is, neuroscience also tells us that through the process of positive neuroplasticity, we also have the power to rewire our brains and to actually hardwire happiness as a greater experience, something that we can experience not only in greater magnitude, but even more frequently. And so what I'd like to do is just to bring to the surface, just remind us of some of the very small and subtle ways that we can start to bring more of that experience into our lives. But I want to be clear, because I don't want to misconstrue that I'm in any way advocating that we ignore that struggle is real, and that oftentimes in our pursuit of happiness, we can actually tend to bypass or suppress difficult emotions, and we neglect to honor the struggle. We tend to numb, right? We seek what Tara Brach calls these false refugees in things like Netflix, social media, drinking for some people. And none of these are necessarily bad in moderation, but I think what's important is that we have to be aware of when we're overindulging in these things as a way of resisting feeling the discomforts of our struggle, numbing or suppressing the difficult emotions, right? And it's sort of like holding the pot cover on a boiling pot or a simmering pot. Eventually, it's going to boil and erupt. And when it does, it starts to leak out in ways that are unhealthy and usually unexpected. And if we're not careful, can start to poison our relationships with people that we love most. And so as we explore what it means to find what feels good, to experience more happiness, the invitation here is also that we build the capacity to also honor the reality of the struggle, to face it head on. And when we do that, turning to and reminding ourselves of our basic goodness, trusting that we have the capacity to meet the fullness of life with this attitude of kindness, with this quality of open-heartedness. And there's really interesting research that shows that those people who experience, or let me not say those people, let me say people who experience great benefit from the practices of mindfulness are those who are able to relate to whatever is happening inside of them with this attitude of kindness. And they regard the experience as a good friend, right? If a friend comes to you and say, Holly, I'm really having a hard time, I bet you're going to meet that friend with curiosity, with interest, with sincere interest in knowing, tell me what's going on, with compassion and with a sense of warmth. And so what if we could treat any experience that comes our way as a friend who has come to us with a problem and respond to it with that attitude of curiosity and compassion and warmth? And so we can create this friendship. We can be in a dance with life. And it's our ability to create these moments of joy, to respond to these stressful situations with choice. It's about choosing to bring deliberate intention, just as we practiced, and directing our attention to cultivating these positive emotional states. And as we do that, the science tells us that the more we do it, it actually strengthens the neural pathways in our brain. And it not only enhances our capacity to deal with life's challenges, it boosts our resilience when we do that, but it also increases our ability to experience those emotional states more often, more frequently, and with more potency. And so life just gets so much richer. The experience enriches. I'm going to check the chat. I see a comment here. Noticing stress where it arises in the body. That's as we were talking about suffering. And then I have appreciation for that idea, meeting those feelings as though they are a good friend and with kindness. Yeah, I'm curious to hear more about about what you're appreciating about that and how you think that might help you as well, if you'd like to share. So 5 practices that have been proven scientifically to hardwire the brain for happiness. And what I love about these, they're not rocket science. They're all things that you've practiced before. They are always available and accessible to you. No technology is needed to experience them. So that's the great news. Very simple. Practice number 1 is kindness. And we know that a smile is the universal language of kindness. And so these two go hand in hand. So there's kindness and there's smiling. And it's this way of approaching life. I don't know where I found this slogan, but it's amor fati, which I've really come to love. And it means an attitude of embracing what life brings our way with this element of wonder and seeing every experience, including our suffering and loss, as just necessary parts of life. And with that curiosity, recognizing that we can also learn from the experience. And so when we approach life with this kindness, we learn to experience the experience of life. We can experience the hardship. We can experience the suffering in a much softer, more delicate way. Again, I love that analogy of the fabric softener. It's like putting on your favorite pair of jeans, forgetting to put the fabric softener in the wash. It's a little harder than if you put the fabric softener, right? And so we can soften the experience with more kindness. And we can do that actively by smiling. So this really interesting fun fact is that even when forced, smiling has been proven to change the chemistry of our brain, and it can shift our mood. You've ever seen a kid who is not having the best day, maybe sad because they didn't get their favorite toy or the candy bar in the store, and the mom tickles him and he starts smiling and the mood just lifts, right? The third is savoring. And so this is tuning into the vividness of any experience. It's just sort of slowing life down a little bit more. So not adding anything extra, but assuming that you drink something when you wake up in the morning. That can be a cup of hot water, a cup of coffee, a cup of tea, and just tuning into the vividness of that experience, smelling it as you're taking it in, really tasting it, noticing how the salivary glands start to activate the first time you put it in your mouth. Just really leaning into the richness of every experience. Noticing the flavors as they burst. I had the most delicious chive and egg something this weekend. I forget exactly what it was, but the flavors that I literally closed my eyes and I was like, oh my gosh, savoring. And then, of course, mindfulness. Training the mind in a way that allows us to take command of our attention. So as you lay in bed tonight, will you focus on all the ways that you feel you have fallen short? Or will you instead shift your attention to focus on what really went well today? And we have this, many of us, a propensity for this low-grade anxiety or anxiousness. And a lot of it is because of the world that we're living in and all the turmoil that we're living in. But what's really interesting is that any emotion that we experience, whether anxiousness or overwhelm or grief, they come in waves. It only actually takes 1.5 minutes for an emotion to rise and pass through the neurocircuitry of our brain. But here's what happens most often, is that we fuel that emotion with thoughts that perpetuate the experience of that emotion. It actually amplifies the experience. So what might that look like? I wake up, which is a real experience for me oftentimes. I wake up, I feel anxious. And now I have a story about the fact that I'm anxious because this means something for how I'm going to move through my day. And it's the story, we call it the second arrow. amplifies the experience of that anxiety. Because for me now, it means I'm not going to function well, or my day's not going to go well. And I have all these stories about what this anxiety, the presence of this anxiety, is going to mean for my day. But instead, if we meet that anxiety with kindness, so you're feeling anxious today. So we're going to be a little bit more gentle with ourselves today. That's what that means. We meet, to Holly's point, the experience with warmth and as a friend. Lots more I could say about that. But the last that I want to invite to the conversation, we couldn't talk about happiness without talking about gratitude, because there is no joy without gratitude. And we hear Brené Brown shares, she's never interviewed a person who talks about the capacity to really experience joy who doesn't actively practice gratitude. And so in these final 2 minutes, inviting you once more to close your eyes, bringing a slight smile to your lips, turning the corners of your mouth upward, inviting this attitude of kindness to your experience right now by bringing this soft smile to your face. And really just saying yes to life, whatever it's bringing your way. And just allowing yourself to be with life in this moment as it is. And because we know that gratitude is a magnet for more goodness, just take a moment to think about all the people and all the things that you are grateful for. The chair beneath you that's holding you up right now. The roof that's over your head, providing shelter and warmth, protecting you from the elements. I'll give you 30 seconds just to run through your mind and to bring into your heart the people, the things, the moments that you are grateful for. Continuing to smile as you do that. And when you're ready, gently opening your eyes. And so in summary, as we bring the session to a formal close, I'll stick around if anyone has thoughts, questions, conversation, but also want to acknowledge that we are now at the halfway point. So if you need to drop, please do. Really just reminding us that life requires two things of us. One, that we have the toolkit, the resourcefulness to support ourselves in managing difficulty. And the second, that we have a practice, a way of activating and amplifying the goodness of life. And so whether for you that's bringing a smile to your face as you move through the rest of your day, or if you practice gratitude as you place your head on your pillow tonight, my invitation is that you continue to gift yourself with these moments of joy and happiness. Not that things have to be so different in a grandiose way for you to be happy, but reminding yourself that you have the power to create that moment for yourself in just 30 seconds. So thank you all so very much. Have a wonderful rest of your day, a wonderful rest of your week. And I'll hang around if there's any questions or comments.